So another really tough week, not just in Liverpool, right across the UK, across the world. It's just flashed up on my phone, for instance, death toll for today, Wednesday, 1,700 people yet again. So really miserable headlines. But Liverpool has there's been this positive streak, in my opinion, running through the city over the past 12 months amongst all the madness. And Liverpool City Council have kind of been at the forefront of that. And some of the work that has been happening behind the scenes has been incredible. So I wanted to speak to someone who can tell us a little bit more about that and also talk about the future of this great city. And it's Chief Exec of Liverpool City Council, Tony Reeves. Tony, thank you for joining us first off.
A pleasure to be here.
Tell us what your role is, Tony, for anyone watching now who doesn't quite understand exactly what you do day to day. What is your main role at Liverpool City Council?
So I'm the chief executive of the city council. That's my job title, which means obviously in a council you have the political side, led by the mayor and the cabinet, and the politicians set the strategy, if you like. They set the policy direction for the council. And my job, working with all of the officers in the council and partners, is to implement that. And in effect, I'm what's called the head of paid service. I'm the most senior officer, so paid official in the organisation, and we do the delivery of that agenda. So we work with the politicians in shaping their policies, but our main job is to do the delivery of that and to implement those things. Now, of course, the council doesn't operate in a silo in the city. So we work with all our partners in the police, the NHS, the universities, education more widely, fire service, etc., and with the voluntary sector, with the private sector as well, like the Chamber of Commerce, etc., to really move things forward for the whole city. And one of the things that's happened in the last 12 months is we launched a new city plan setting out the strategic direction for the city going forwards. And that was, rather than being just a council document, it was owned by all of those partners I just listed. And really important. And what we want that to do is to shape the way that all of the different institutions in the city work so that we're more aligned and we're all focused on getting the best outcomes for Liverpool people. And part of my job is coordinating all of that activity and making sure that the council works with its partners and we've got everything pointing in the same direction.
Tony, obviously Liverpool was in a really great place, 12 months ago. Sure it is going forward as well. How does your role change? It must have changed instantly overnight, like many roles did across the board. 12 months, these past 10 months, what's it been like being chief exec of a local authority like Liverpool City Council?
To be perfectly honest, Jay, it's been really tough. And it's just been, that period's been a blur, but there was clearly in the first few weeks, particularly, we had to reorganize the council. We changed our whole business model. So we had 4,500 people working from home, all online within 5 days of the lockdown starting. And if you remember, there wasn't a long lead-in time to the lockdown. It was announced and happened overnight. And we transitioned to a completely different way of working. We had to get that sorted. Of course, we had to work on the response to the crisis, making sure that we were working with our NHS partners and others to look after vulnerable people, to get food supplies out to people, to make sure there was proper support in place for care homes, all sorts of things like that we had to get stuck into managing the crisis in the city. And we did that. But what we also did, and I think set us apart from a lot of other places, as we saw right from the outset that this lockdown and pandemic was going to be really damaging to the economy and was going to lead to a prolonged economic shutdown for key sectors, and that we needed to be planning for recovery right from the outset. And so we started work in the first couple of weeks of the first lockdown back in March last year to plan economic recovery. And we actually submitted a plan to the government about 6 weeks before anybody else in the country, actually before government started talking about economic recovery. And we've been working hard to implement that plan ever since. We had to work to reopen the city after the first lockdown. And I think we did that really successfully with some real creativity about how we use the streetscape to create extra capacity for hospitality with the concept of Liverpool without walls, the way in which we engage with businesses around getting business grant payments out to businesses very, very quickly to support them, and working really closely with our private sector colleagues to come up with an economic plan that really worked for business as well. And so rather than just focusing on the here and now and the crisis, we didn't take our eye off the ball on that, but we absolutely sought to reposition Liverpool in terms of how we wanted to come out of COVID as quickly and as successfully as we could to protect as many jobs as possible. And that has been, as well as the public health challenge of saving lives. I know Liverpool has been hit, despite all the innovative stuff we've done on mass testing, etc. Liverpool's been hit really hard by this crisis because it's got some underlying health conditions that you get in, with a lot of poor communities and things. And we've worked really hard with our partners to minimise that impact, but we've also had an eye on to the long-term well-being of the city, jobs, businesses, etc., that are critical for all of us going forwards.
It's funny you say that. Just for me, as someone who works, as a media platform director, it's been really difficult to kind of communicate the message of safety, but also trying to save our local businesses and the economy, as you say. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? And that must have been really difficult for you guys at the City Council.
I think it does present some challenges. If you get sucked into just dealing with the pandemic, I think you miss some tricks here, because if we look at the whole thing through a wider well-being lens, then people's mental health is actually incredibly important. And as we've seen the months go on, the pressure on individuals, not just people who are at home who are shielding, people who are worried about getting infected, but actually people worried about their livelihoods, about their businesses, that all sorts of other things. The mental health challenge is really, really significant. And if we don't focus on protecting jobs and protecting businesses, and we end up with mass unemployment in the long run, then of course that affects people's well-being, that affects their health long term. And that what that means is that the legacy of the pandemic will go on for very much longer if we don't focus on those things as well. So we try to take a more holistic view, perhaps, if you like, a public health view rather than just the clinical bit of COVID. And that's not to diminish the need to really focus on those issues, but we can't just look at the pandemic. I think we've seen examples of where, not just here, but overseas as well, where the people have zeroed in and only concentrated on the pandemic. And then loads more people have died from cancer and stuff like that, because people have only, as if everything else has stopped. And of course, other things don't stop. There are other things that need attention, other health issues, including mental health, that needs attention, other wider issues that make a real difference to how people live their lives. And it's really important to keep the city functioning and keep that wider focus without in any way undermining the efforts to fight the pandemic. And I think, people will judge in time. I think Liverpool has done as well as anywhere in trying to achieve that balance.
Completely agree. And you can see that, just through your comms messages, for instance, the safety messages that are put out there. Mass testing, we got to talk about this. First city to do so. I know you were instrumental in kind of snagging the government to get them to bring this to Liverpool. It worked well, but many people now saying, did it work? Didn't it work? With obviously the cases going up. We have got to say that mass testing, it did work, didn't it, looking back?
And it's still working, Jay. It's been a really. It's not a total solution. Nothing is. Even mass vaccination won't be a total solution to this pandemic, but it is the game changer in terms of our ability to getting life back to near normal. Mass testing has made a real difference. And let me just talk through very briefly how that has worked. We've identified thousands of people who are asymptomatic, who, as a result of the mass testing, the lateral flow tests, who had no symptoms, took themselves out of circulation, and that broke chains of transmission of the infection. Without that, the infection levels would have been very much worse in the city. And because we were so successful, the whole partnership, and of course the way the people of Liverpool responded by getting tested and buying into what we were doing as a city, it really has been a whole Liverpool effort. We got the levels of the infection down from being the highest in the country to really, really low in the run up to December. And as a result of that, we were placed in tier 2 when we came out of the last lockdown, which meant that big chunks of our economy, like the hospitality sector, could reopen for that crucial period in December where hospitality sector makes 30 or 40% of its profit in 1 month for the whole of their trading year. And in terms of, after a very difficult year last year, we thought that was incredibly important to try to achieve that for our businesses and actually for people in Liverpool to go out for a meal, etc. One of the things that, because we were one of the few parts of the country that were in tier 2, what ended up happening is we got a lot of hospitality tourism. So lots of hotels were full in December, people from London, from Yorkshire, from Manchester, etc., coming into Liverpool, and that boosted trade without a doubt. That, you know, people were coming to do their shopping and Christmas shopping in Liverpool because they could get a meal that they couldn't get in other places. So they get the wider experience. But what that meant was a lot of people coming from outside, from higher tier areas with higher infection rates, coming into the city, together with a lot more mixing of people in the Christmas period. We believe that has and of course, we couldn't foresee the numbers of people coming in, or we didn't foresee. Some people could argue we could have done, but we didn't, if I'm brutally honest, that number of people coming into the city. And, you know, restaurateurs telling me right from the outset, we're getting a lot of bookings from people from elsewhere. And there's a lot of Cockney accents in Liverpool and stuff like that. And obviously, we're a city that attracts lots of visitors, and we're used to that. But it was, you know, it was unusual in that, you know, given where we were, and government advice for people in tier 3 and tier 4 areas was not to travel, but it was advice, not a requirement. So all of that, together with mixing, household mixing over Christmas, led to a really big spike at the beginning of January, and we went back up from less than 100 cases per 100,000. We went right back up very, very quickly to over 1,000, which is the highest it's been in Liverpool during the whole pandemic. And actually, we've got the combination of this latest lockdown plus continuing to use lateral flow testing, asymptomatic testing, widely, particularly on people that have to come out of their houses during a lockdown for work and other reasons, and encouraging lots of people to get tested. We're still testing thousands of people. We think we've broken a lot more chains of transmission, and the numbers are coming down rapidly. They've now about halved in the space of the last 10 or 12 days, and we think they'll continue to come down, and we'll be back down at 100 or below with any luck in the next, you know, certainly in the next week or so, and get that right back under control. And of course, we're with all the way through this pandemic, we've been in uncharted territory. We've learned a hell of a lot, and actually a lot of the things that we've learned will stand Liverpool in good stead going forwards, including attracting research funding and potential, you know, businesses coming into the city that focus on health and life sciences and help us with the economic recovery, because that's a real strength for us with things like the School of Tropical Medicine, the university, etc., here in the city. So, and there's been a lot of debate about, you know, the efficacy or how successful lateral flow testing is, and that it's not 100% accurate. Well, no testing is. But what we have to bear in mind here, we were testing asymptomatic people with no symptoms, who, without getting that test, would have carried on in circulation. And we have identified thousands of people that have then self-isolated and broken those chains of transmission. So we're absolutely clear that in the final analysis, this will come out as it was the right thing to do. It was a bold decision by the city to take this on board, and all the partners were part of that. And Liverpool people have bought into it, and it has made a real difference. I guess the million-dollar question is, if we had our time over and I was providing advice on this again, what would that advice be? And it would be unequivocally, let's do it, genuinely.
Brilliant. And, you know, personally, I did see it work. And you're right in what you said. It gave us our Christmas, which I think was just a little thing, but a really important thing for many, many people. The city recovery, it's going to be a long, long process, this, Tony. Talk us through short term, first of all. So the kind of next 12 months, how do you see us continuing to fight the virus? Yeah,
the really key thing is to get vaccination levels as high as we can get them. You know, we're told 80% is the sort of threshold to hit, and that needs to be 80% across all of our communities and in every part of Liverpool. One of the things that this pandemic has done, is it's increased inequality in our communities, and let's be brutally honest about that. People in poor communities are 2.5 times more likely to die from COVID than people in more affluent communities, and I think that data is available nationally, and it's made that worse. What's really important that we don't leave any communities behind as we come into recovery. The quicker we get people vaccinated, the quicker we get things back to normal, open up the economy, but do that safely, so we don't just go into the next spiral where the virus gets out of control again and we end up going back into lockdown, the better. Our job is to make sure Liverpool comes out of this faster and better than other places, and we're working really, really hard to do that. I can't say to you this is straightforward, Jay, because it's not. The economic consequences of this pandemic, coupled with, all the transition from Brexit, etc., it's going to be really, really hard. The timing of it couldn't have been worse with that on the horizon as well. There's going to be further unemployment, I think, without a doubt, as furlough unfolds and things. But we have to do the very best we can in the city, make sure we're playing to our strengths, that we've got a clear strategy that where the public sector and business are working together, and that we really focus on inclusion and getting people back into work as quickly as we can, and we create the conditions for accelerated economic growth, and we do that in a way that's sustainable, and that's what we're all about. As I said, this isn't going to be easy, and we've got some tough months ahead without a doubt, and it's going to take some time to get back to the levels of growth we had before the pandemic. But the strength of partnership in the city, the assets that we have, the spirit of Scousers, who are incredibly resilient people and absolutely come together like no other communities I've ever come across in a crisis. I think all of those things are strengths, and it's not about getting carried away, but it's about doing the right things in the right order and being really bold. And if some things don't work, fine, let's fail quickly and learn from it and move on. But let's not go into our shell and follow the pack. We need to lead, and we need to be the best we can for Liverpool. And that means bold decisions, and being prepared to stick our necks out. And we're doing that on a daily basis to create the conditions for growth, but to do that safely and not in any way taking our eye off the public health challenges. Even when the risk of death has reduced massively from this pandemic, the ongoing mental health legacy from this and other things will need really serious attention, and it's very, very important that we keep our focus on those things as well, and we will do.
Tony, just briefly, because I know you're tight on time, some of the things we've still got to look forward to, and some of the things that were maybe put on hold during all of this, things like the cruise terminal. We're going to see new developments. We're going to see the city continuing to grow. We will welcome tourists back as well, which is really important. Where do you see us in 2-5 years' time?
Okay, so the cruise industry will come back without a doubt. The question is how long that will take. The work we're doing in the Knowledge Quarter, as we call it, that area around the universities from Lime Street Station up, we've got really, really important projects. The next phase of Paddington Village is nearing completion with the Spine and the Royal College of Physicians moving in there. We think that'll be a catalyst for a lot more investment in that area, and we're preparing for that. We've got really strong partners during the course of the pandemic. Bruntwood SciTech, which is a joint venture between the Science Park developers, Bruntwood, and Legal & General, have acquired a 25% stake in Liverpool Science Parks, which is jointly owned by the council and the universities, with a view to invest heavily in growth in science-based industries in the city. The Pall Mall development as the next phase of the Central Business District, I'm confident will go ahead this year, later in the year. There's things are slow at the moment because of the pandemic, but these things will come back in, and I think you'll see some real progress in the city. We're going to continue to work really hard with all of the different partners in the city and with the city region and the Metro Mayor and everybody else to keep things moving forwards. And I think what you'll see is Liverpool being on a different trajectory than other cities. I think we'll be bolder, and I think we've demonstrated that through the pandemic. we're going to face some real challenges, but I'm really confident we can make a really good fist of it and come out of this as strongly as possible. But I'll be honest, Jay, it's going to take that 2 to 5 year period to get back to where we want to be. But I think we will be able to safely start attracting large numbers of visitors again, in the next year or two, and have big events to celebrate life in the way that Liverpool does, better than any other city I've ever come across, to get things moving, to get the economy moving, and to rebuild that confidence that the city's got a great future, which it absolutely has. I think that will come back strongly, and it's about building from there. It's about making sure what we do is sustainable, that we're prepared. We don't just replace what we had before, but we've got climate change in mind, making sure that we're reducing carbon emissions, that we're seen as a green city. But it's really important for me that what we do is inclusive, and that we don't leave any communities behind. So equally important is getting the focus on education and making sure we keep improving education provision in the city, so that every young person growing up has access to a good education and can see a pathway into a really good job for themselves, to build that level of aspiration across all our communities. All of these things are really important. And we keep improving health outcomes for people in the city, so that they're able to work, longer into their lives, to deal with poverty, to improve household incomes, improve their housing conditions, all of those things that matter. And all of this, I think we've got a really coherent plan in the city plan. All the partners are bought into it, and I think the spirit of the city will not be broken by this crisis at all. I think we need to use this as a launch pad for the next phase of Liverpool's journey. And I'm really excited to be a senior public servant working for the people of this city. I think, it's a really challenging time, and there's other challenges we haven't mentioned. It's probably best not to, but we've got really exciting times ahead of us. And I think Liverpool's potential is limitless, and I can't think of a more exciting place to work, quite frankly.
Well, do you know what, Tony? You've just given me goosebumps as you were talking then. Really inspiring stuff. I really do admire your passion as well. You're not from Liverpool, which we can tell by the accent, but your passion for the city and what you do just shines through. So thank you so much. Tony Reeves, Chief Executive of Liverpool City Council. Thank you so much, Tony.
Good to see you, Jay.